the next generation of lifestyle awareness that will transform your life significantly. Hi, welcome to Living Wow Out Loud. I'm your host, CallyRae, founder of the Living Wow Center and author of the book, 8 Lessons Lupus Taught Me, From Surviving to Thriving with Autoimmune Diseases. Living Wow is a lifestyle of choice and intention that was born from the truths that, number one, your body is designed to heal if you give it the environment to do so. Number two, you don't need a label or permission to be the expert in your own body. And number three, more than 80% of all diseases can be prevented or reversed by lifestyle. Unfortunately, this isn't what we're taught in our standard American diet and lifestyle culture. This podcast is a voice of hope and community where you will learn how to live a life of thriving that honors and embraces those three truths. Though you are an individual, you are not alone, and you can thrive living wow too. Welcome back to Living Wow Out Loud. I'm your host, CallyRae. Today, I want to sit down and have a heart-to-heart with you, or maybe a mind-to-mind. I don't know how you want to define it, but as I was reflecting on what I wanted to bring to you for this episode of the podcast, one of the things that came to my mind was a quote that was an inspiration that came to me during a meditation a couple of years ago. I actually wrote it down because I felt like it was so profound for me. And this is the quote. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you had. It matters what you did with it. It doesn't matter how much time you had. It matters what you did with it. It doesn't matter how much health you had. It matters what you did with it. It's a choice. The choice is where the freedom is. The choice is what matters. The reason that was so profound to me was because throughout my life, I've used those three freedoms as my goals, right? That's what I've set out to refine, is if I could achieve time freedom, if I could achieve financial freedom, if I could achieve health freedom, I would have no worries. I would have no problems. And as I have matured and gone through more seasons in my life, some of those freedoms are elusive, right? Time freedom, when you are a parent, time freedom is very elusive because we have so many responsibilities and demands on our times. It came to me that it's not so much about achieving a certain landmark, like if I can make $1 million, I'll have financial freedom. If I can take time to do X, then I have achieved time freedom. Or if I can manage my clock rather than having my clock manage me, those kinds of things. And then the one that really struck me and was the catalyst to all of it, and I wrote about it in 8 Lessons Lupus Taught Me, is the health is number one. I don't even know that I had that health freedom as one of those goals until I had my crisis and eventually my transformation, because I realized if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. It doesn't matter how much time you have. It doesn't matter how much money you have because you can't use it. You can't enjoy it. You can't spend it. And the idea of spending time with the people you want to, the people you love, the idea of sharing, being able to make your decisions based on what you want to do rather than what you can afford to do, right? I think we can all relate with those frustrations and maybe that limiting mindset. And it was just something that throughout my life has definitely been a goal and a frustration. And so when I had this mindset shift and I realized that freedom, how I was defining freedom, was that ability to do what I want, when I want, with who I want. That was freedom. When this inspiration came to me, I realized that I was going about it all wrong. And so I wanted to speak to you about that today, not because I now know the right way to look at it, but just again to take some layers off the onion as we are dealing with mindset, because mindset is a really important part of our lifestyle. In fact, safety and freedom are things that are very core to many of us. And I just feel like you can't thrive if you are in that level of striving. I do believe that we need to strive, because you're either moving forward or backward. You're either getting better or worse. There is no just existence where we just are in a static state. That just doesn't exist. So you need to be striving, but I think it's the mindset. I want to just touch on and have you maybe reflect and think about how you frame success, how you frame freedom, how you frame thriving. What do those things mean to you? How do you define them? And maybe, like me, maybe you define them to be being able to either achieve a certain number, a certain status, a certain experience, and that is then how you know that you have made it, that you've achieved that. Let's just break it down a little bit. I want to start with health freedom. And I mentioned that this is the one that I probably didn't even think about my health. I was thinking about my kids' health. I was thinking about my husband's health. And I thought about my health as far as if you're sick and you have to stay home from work, that kind of thing. But as far as being in the best shape of my life, or being able to do the things that my body was designed to do, and making time for activities that support my physical abilities. My husband's always been very athletic, and I don't know that I have. I was in high school, but then once I was off the dance team, I really didn't have any. I'm not athletic as far as running is not my jam, never has been. And balls, I have the worst hand-eye coordination on the planet. And so I'm not a gym rat. That was never a part of my identity, my interests. And so I think because of that, neither was health. I just really took it for granted. It wasn't until I had my crisis, even when I had the diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis, it was just so normal for me. My grandma and my mom had rheumatoid arthritis, so I just figured, oh, okay, I'm going to have rheumatoid arthritis. I didn't really think about what that meant as far as my health and my activity. I had pain, and working out just seemed like a nightmare. It was not going to happen because I had chronic pain throughout my body. And it wasn't until that chronic pain was lifted through nutrition that I was like, oh, wow, it feels good to move my body. And so I was 40 years old before I had my awareness that health really matters. Isn't that sound crazy? Isn't that crazy to me that it took me until age 40 to realize that health freedom meant that I could do what I wanted, with who I wanted, when I wanted. And I still define it that way. I just don't want to be limited. I don't want to have to sit on the sidelines. Like when my husband's knees were really bad and he needed to have knee replacement, we would go hiking to the lighthouses on the coast, and he would have to sit behind in the car because he couldn't hike. And so he missed out on those family experiences. And there was just a period of our life when that happened. And then for me, when I would go through these periods of illness and infections, and I was just down in bed with exhaustion so deep and significant that you can't really understand it unless you've experienced that sheer exhaustion. And it's very common with autoimmune diseases, so you probably have experienced it. I didn't connect the dots. I just thought you're sick, you go to sleep. But I didn't realize until it dawned on me that health freedom really is the number one, the most important. Having your health and having the ability to use your health however you want it to do the activities, because your health is that underlying status of your body. And I would go even further, not even just your body, but also of your mind and your spirit, right? Your energy. That's what we're talking about today, is the mindset piece of it. If you are in a mental health crisis, The same is true. You cannot, if anxiety or depression, if you are in that place, you are not able to do the things you want to do. You just physically cannot do it because mentally you don't have that capacity. And so all of those things, that's why I say health is number one. And like I said, it took me to age 40 to even figure that out. And it went from not even on my radar as a priority to being number one, because I realized if I was in bed, if I was exhausted, if you're in the hospital, if you're recovering from a surgery, you can't do the things that you want to do or even the things you need to do. It's just so critical. But then I wanted to take it one step further today and say, okay, now that you realize the importance of health, and it's the number one priority, and now the goal is health freedom, right? You want to have the health, the mental health, the emotional health, the spiritual health, the physical health, to be able to do and participate and be your best you with those people you love. But what if you're not? Does that mean that you're failing? Does that mean, I guess, freedom, depending on how you're defining it, can really be elusive. And so it's always this thing we're striving for. I want to be in the best shape of my life. Well, what does that look like? I think if we recognize what is the choice, how are we using it? That's the idea today, is to redefine freedom, not as this ability to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, not having any restrictions, freedom, no restrictions, to instead of it being no restrictions, being the freedom to choose, right? How you're choosing to use your health. Like I said, I wasn't really ever a gym rat, but when I realized how important it was to keep my body vital and strong, I had a gym membership and I started working out and I had a trainer and I figured out how to use the different pieces of equipment and what I liked and what I didn't. I still find treadmills so boring. I hate them, but I love a rowing machine. I love a bike. Not so much a stationary bike, but a real bike where I can be out in nature. So finding those things that, again, they were never on my radar. I didn't even know that it was something that my body liked. I knew I liked to dance because I was a dancer when I was younger. And so I know that I love music and I love movement, but traditional exercise or walking just to walk, running just to run, it didn't make any sense to me. But now if I'm doing it as a part of my meditation or I'm doing yoga, I'm using my body to stay balanced and flexible and strong. The freedom is how you choose to use it, not a place that you reach. I'm hoping that today, as I unpack these three different kinds of freedom and the way that we maybe redefine it so that we're not always feeling like we are striving for something. I love the phrase, and I've used it for many years, and I don't even remember who I heard it from. I just heard it again. I read it recently in another book, but it's that whole concept that I don't strive for perfection. I strive for excellence, because honestly, perfection is unattainable. And I feel the same way with freedom, right? Freedom is unattainable depending on how you define it. And so it's really the excellence. It's the excellence in how we're using the freedom that we have, because let's be real, we are so blessed. And I live in the United States, and we are in the middle of massive political strife and tension because it's an election year, and there is a lot of fear of loss of freedoms. There is a lot of unrest. But still, I feel so blessed because I'm not in a part of the world where there's bombs going off over my head, and some of you are. I know we have listeners around the world, and so recognizing that even in situations where we don't have the freedom to maybe do everything we want to do, when we want to do it, how we want to do it, because of our laws or our political oppression or war, those kinds of things. I hope that you recognize that today what I'm really talking about is that personal freedom. And we are so blessed that even in those kinds of situations, We always have our personal freedom. And that's that mindset. I think it was Viktor Frankl, who he was detained at a camp in World War II and was held as a Jewish prisoner, and all of his family was killed. And kept this mindset and survived the encampment and wrote about it, and has just had a huge impact on millions of people. The reality is we have that choice, even if we're hurting, even if we're sick. Honestly, I had a flare recently that was, I'm sure, stress induced. Stress is one of those triggers that can hit me and catch me off guard. I can't take away everything that happens in life, and I don't want to, but this particular thing I could have done without. And so it threw me into a lupus flare, and I haven't had a lupus flare like that in a couple of years. And it was very painful, and I literally had to shut down. I limped through a little bit and then just had to completely shut down and bounced back in about 5 days. So historically, just to give you some reference, I was not aware at all of my mindset and of how everything played together. Didn't understand my body the way that I do now, and the way that I'm trying to teach you to understand your body. If you can understand and recognize some of those triggers that are affecting your health and your autoimmune diseases, or just your health in general. What I've learned for me is if I have something that is traumatic, I hesitate to use the term traumatic, but it just indicates that it was like a sudden, unexpected, significant event that had me very heightened in my fight or flight. I was very worried. I was trying to solve the situation. I felt very helpless, which is also a very big thing for me. If I feel helpless, my body just really, it's like, oh, we can't do anything here, so we're going to shut down. And that's not always the best. So that happened. And I thought, okay, I was working through it. I was doing what I could do. I was giving the rest of it to God, because I find that those are the effective strategies for me. And yet, about 3 days later, I started getting sick, and I was like, oh, well, there's a bunch of stuff going around. I just have a sniffles and a cough. And about 5 days into it, I was completely in a full-blown flare. And that's historically what happens. But again, once I realized, hold on a second, this is my autoimmune disease, my indicator lights were flashing like crazy. And I went into repair mode. And so it only took me, I wasn't even out a full week. So 5 days from the onset of the event until the time I was able to be back up into working and running at full throttle again. I still had some energy issues for a couple of days, so probably a week from actual beginning until end. A week for me that's significant. To go from months of recovery to days of recovery, less than a week, that's huge. Again, it's that mindset and going, okay, I am not at my best. I don't have the full freedoms that I wish, but right now, what do I have? What choices am I making? I'm choosing to recognize that I need to rest and choosing to shut down and sleep. I'm listening. That was freedom, because inside of my situation that I couldn't control, that was very scary and overwhelming to me, I was able to pause and pray and rest. And that healed me. There wasn't anything physically that I did. I didn't change necessarily my diet because I'm already dialed in there, right? So again, your health freedom is that choice. It's choosing what you eat. It's choosing how you move your body. It's choosing what you drink. It's choosing how you rest. All of those things affect your health. And that's all a part of that choice. That empowerment is part of your mindset. I hope that helps you understand how, even though you might not feel like you have complete health freedom, in the moment you can take that and make a choice, and that choice is your freedom. And so recognizing the freedom not as the destination, but as the ability to choose and making the choice that is true to you. As we look at time freedom, everybody has the exact same amount of time. So time freedom is really a utilization issue. And for me, again, time freedom meant that they all go together, because time freedom does not matter if I don't have my health, because I don't want all the time in the world if I'm sick. I don't. I don't want to be sick longer. And financial freedom. If I can't do what I want to do because I have to be making money, right? I can't go somewhere with my time because I can't afford to, or I can't buy something I want to buy because I don't have the money. Time for me is very much defined in how I use it. And again, it took me even longer, probably. I probably really didn't have an appreciation for time freedom until even in the last 5 years. And that's understanding that, again, the choice is mine in the moment. Anybody out there who has a hard time saying no, who wants to make sure that if it's done right, that means you have to do it. You can't have somebody else do it. Maybe you have a hard time asking for help. Control freak. I started to understand this in my 40s, and I did write a bit about it. How do you eat an elephant? That lesson in 8 Lessons does tap into the time freedom aspect a little bit. But of course, as life does, there are ongoing lessons, and hence the new book that will be coming out here within the next 6 months. But the Living Wow lifestyle has really been that culmination of how I've spent my time in my lifestyle, how I've organized my time to be thriving. And by no means, again, am I an expert? And by no means do I have it figured out. There are still, I look up here at my battle board, which I've gone from a year down to 6 months. Now I've taken it from 6 months. It's only 3 months. I just have a quarter on my battle board at a time. And I've got my goals and targets and opportunities and the big rocks. And I look at August, because it's the end of the quarter. I look at August and I had 4 big rocks. They all got moved to September. That's not very good time management, CallyRae. I had 4. And as I look at the 2 that I have in September, they're actually going to be pushed into October. They're both for the book, and they're going to be pushed into October because of my work schedule. So here I am in that time mastery, manipulation, prioritization. And so do I have time freedom? Well, it depends on how you define it. In my old definition of time freedom, that's the ability to do what I want, when I want, with who I want. And no, I don't have that, because I work 2 jobs. I have a podcast, I'm writing a book, and I have a lot of things on my plate. My kids are all grown right now, but by no means does that mean that they don't need their mother anymore. And so I still, even though I'm an empty nester, I still have parenting to do, supporting my kids. I think redefining that time freedom from I have all the time in the world, I just don't think, even if I did have all the time in the world, what would I do with it? And that's where it comes down to that choice, how you're using the time you do have. When I look at it, when I change that mind shift from it being a destination, time freedom, to being a choice that I make every day, that's why the things got switched from August to September, because I had some other things I needed to do in August. And so the book got pushed back a little bit. The podcast, we ran into some technical issues and needed to retool our software and our editor we were using. And so those things messed things up, right? But rather than going, oh, all is lost, I don't have my time freedom, I can't do it. Instead, to go, okay, well, what can we do? Well, we can get a new editor, one that is better for us. And we can reach out and reschedule our guests. We can be flexible. The other things on here are some travel plans that we have, and they aren't ready to be done. So they weren't really big rocks. They were just timelines. So understanding the difference between things that if you don't get this done, you can't move on to the next thing, or just something that is there as a time marker because, oh, this is going to be 6 months out from this next event. We need to make sure that we have it on the calendar. So again, going into that daily, what is the choice? I'm choosing to not just ignore and just put out fires all day long and take care of everybody else, but I'm actually making a conscious choice. I think that's the key. How do you make a conscious choice in how you're spending your time rather than just you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh my gosh, today just happened. I don't know what, there was nothing that I planned that I accomplished today. You've had that day, right? I've had that day. That's the difference between time freedom, in my opinion, in this redefined freedom. The ability to intentionally choose what you want. It might not be a vacation to Tahiti. It might be making a phone call to a friend. But you chose that. And that's what you chose to do with those 2 hours. The other day, I was on a FaceTime with my daughter for 2.5 hours. And I don't regret a minute of it because we got to spend that time together. And so that to me is time freedom. The fact that I could pause and she could pause and we could make each other a priority and just talk, just be together. That again is time freedom. Think about that. Instead of striving and having this destination, what about just having the freedom to choose how you're spending your time today, in this minute, in this next 10 minutes. You've got the freedom to choose right now because you're choosing to listen to this podcast. You're exercising your time freedom because you are, and I appreciate that. I recognize and appreciate that you've taken the time. You've made the choice to listen. I want it to be valuable and have you think or learn something new. Have you consider a different perspective than what we just have always done automatically, because for 40 years I did that. And like I said, I think it took me even longer, probably closer to 50 years with my time, to understand that I don't have to do it all. I don't have to control it all. I don't have to be it all. I can pause and I can choose to turn off, to engage, to be present. And all of that is time freedom. When you do that, you're thriving. Okay, and then finally, financial freedom. Financial freedom is defined so differently by so many people, and it has so much with it, right? There's so much baggage. And it's not even a part of living wow, but it is, right? Living wow is not the lifestyle of the rich and famous. It is not a certain status that you achieve that then you can say, I'm living wow. Wow is an experience. And so it really doesn't matter what your annual income is or whether you are a stay-at-home mom or a 7-figure CEO. That doesn't matter because there are 7-figure CEOs who are not thriving. They are living sad and they are sick. They don't have health freedom. They don't have time freedom. And so even though we may perceive, gosh, multimillionaire, you've got all of the financial freedom you could possibly want. But again, how are you using it? And how is it aligning with your purpose and who you were created to be? Understanding that financial freedom is not living wow. It's not thriving. Is financial freedom important? Yes. How you define it, how you choose. Again, for me, financial freedom was that I would be able to have the means to make a decision based on who I was with, what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, when I wanted to go, rather than how much money I had. Could I afford to take the time off work? The bottom line, can I afford it? You go to buy something. Can I afford it? So financial freedom to me was a can I afford it decision. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think that's very common here in the standard American diet and lifestyle. That's how most Americans make financial decisions. Can I afford it? Okay. And so that's not unique to me. And that's why I want to address it, because finances are a big part of our health. They are a big part of our lifestyle. And so it would be remiss for me to not address it, even though it's like politics. It's really not a comfortable place for me to be because I am not rich and famous. And so I don't feel like I can spew from this platform of I have a 7-figure income, and because of that, I can tell you how to do it too. That's not what this is about. This is about I have learned some life lessons and realized that there's some universal systems across our lifestyle, our energy, our nutrition, our self-care, our supplements, our mindset, our spirit, the environment we choose to put ourselves in, all of those aspects of our lifestyle. I call them the systems, just like we have systems in our body, our circulatory system and our muscular system and our nervous system. In our physical body, we have those same systems in our lifestyle. They comprise who we are and how we feel and how we are living. And that's where Living Wow was born. It came from that whole concept of we are not just the food we eat. It's not just the diet, the fad diet of the week or the year. We're not just how often you go to the gym. And we are also not just the balance of our bank account. So to understand that, and I guess for me, the balance of my bank account adds to that stress. I already mentioned that stress is a huge trigger for me. When I don't have enough money for the month, then I'm stressed. When I don't know how I'm going to pay for this emergency that's happened, I'm stressed. And so I have to address financial freedom because in my mind, for 40 years, if I had financial freedom, then I would have health freedom and I would have time freedom because financial freedom gave me all these other things. And what I have learned is that is not true. And I can tell you that I have had a lot of money and I have had very little money. And yes, I would much rather have a lot than a little. It definitely does help. And I am not saying that there's anything wrong with that or anything wrong with striving for that because being able to make a decision based on my desires or my circumstances rather than my bank account still is very important to me. So with that said, it does not define your freedom. Your freedom is defined by the choice you make. So what are you doing with the money that you do have? Are you ignoring it? Are you ashamed of it? Are you sharing it? Are you giving it? Are you investing it? Are you growing it? What are you doing with it? That is your freedom. Your freedom is not how much you have. Your freedom is what are you choosing to do with what you have? And recognizing that you do have a choice, no matter how much it is. You do have a choice. And I think that's the mind shift for me, is recognizing that no matter how much money I have or do not have, I have the choice of how I'm going to use it or not. And that in and of itself is empowering. That in and of itself is freedom. That in and of itself will help you set the goals and be able to, if it's more that you want, then to figure out how to get more. And if it's to give more, you'll see the opportunities where you can give more. Understanding that it's not necessarily about a certain dollar amount or a certain something that you've achieved, right? Something that's tangible. Because when we're talking about health and we're talking about time and we're talking about finances are the most tangible of those. Right? You can see how much money you do or do not have. Your health is much more nebulous, right? How do you feel? Feel is very elusive. And time is just an abstract concept. And we all have the same amount of time, period. There's no arguing that because it is this abstract concept that we've attached seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, seasons, and years to. How are you choosing to use the time you have is your time freedom. Health. Do you recognize that health is so important? And even though it's nebulous, you can use it. You can choose to support it. You either have sick cells or healthy cells, Which are you doing? Are you growing healthy cells or are you growing sick cells? Because they're regenerating all the time. You have a choice. How are you feeding them? What kind of environment? Understanding that you have freedom, even if you're not where you want to be, even if you don't feel like you can do, even if you are sick in bed with a flare right now. I get it. You can choose to rest and not feel ashamed, not be frustrated. You can embrace that as an opportunity to just be. It's a great opportunity to study and learn. It's a great opportunity to be with God, to just commune, just worship, just talk. That's what I get out of my rest from my illness. It's a great time to recalibrate and check myself and go, you know what? I was on my own here, and I need to give some of this back to God and recognize that I'm not using my time the way I want to. Okay, so you can do that even in the middle of a full-on, exhausted, brain fog, hurting from head to toe, wiped out flare. And then finally, the financial freedom, being able to define all of these areas of your life by your mindset. Is it abundant or is it scarcity? Is it control or is it surrender? How are you framing the choices that you're making? And just the sheer fact that we have those choices, the ability to make them, and that we're able to recognize it, that's living wow. That is the freedom to thrive. Because when we are using our freedoms and we're being intentional in our choices that we make, that's living wow. That's what it's all about. Because then you are living true to who you were born to be. You're not just going through the motions. You're not in this state of struggle, trying to attain something that's not true to you. You're aligned. And when you're aligned, your health will align. That's been my true experience. I just want you to understand this was a deep reflection, and I feel a little vulnerable sharing with you some of my weaknesses or shame or struggles that I've had. And I do it for you to understand that you're not alone, and for you to understand that there is a different way. There's a better way. I think it's a better way because I feel like thriving is way better than surviving. And just recognizing the power of choice and the freedom that comes with that. And when you have that freedom, you have that power. And when you have that power, it fuels all of those. It fuels your time, it fuels your health, and it also fuels your finances. So I hope that you got something from this today. I hope that you can maybe reflect on the places where you're on autopilot and or stuck in a limiting belief mindset, and recognize that it's not just a switch. You can't just flip it on and go, oh, well, today I'm going to be intentional and today I'm going to love my freedoms and make all these choices. It's a process. And I come from such a deep rooted fear and scarcity lifestyle and living sad for so many years that I really just have to be top of mind and on purpose with my decisions that I make. And as I'm doing, that's freedom. That's what it is. That's living wow. That's where I want to leave you today. I want to leave you with some of that reflection. I started with the quote. I'm going to end with the quote again because I want you to think about it now that I've given you a little bit of framework to hang it on. Freedom redefined. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money you had. It matters what you did with it. It doesn't matter how much time you had. It matters what you did with it. It doesn't matter how much health you had. It matters what you did with it. It's a choice. The choice is where the freedom is, and the choice is what matters. I'm choosing to use and experience in the way that is true to my creation and purpose. Until next time, shine on. Hey, if you find value here on the Living Wow Out Loud podcast, will you please share it with your friends and take a minute to rate it on the platform that you're listening on? That's how we live wow out loud. You know that more people need hope and they need the messages shared. And that's how we get recognized among all the noise. this is where you find your voice. Will you please share and subscribe and rate so that we can grow?